It's publication day, and I thought you might enjoy a little extract read by the author. That's me. It was a perfectly normal day. Peterson was out of the way in his office doing whatever it is deputy directors do all day long. I've never been able to work it out, and I suspect he doesn't know either. Our liaison officer, Calinda Black, was in her office, hopefully massively exaggerating our achievements to our overlords at Thirsk and securing our funding for the next 12 months. Dr. Dowson was assisting the history department in sorting through our written material. I'd no idea what Professor Rapson was, but he was probably with Miss Lingos, so I wasn't too concerned. Nothing was on fire. No sinister green gas was seeping through the building, melting everything in its path. Bashford was actually present and conscious. Everything was lovely. St Mary's was functioning exactly as it should do, and there was toad in the hole for lunch. You see, we can do it when we try. I knew a visitor had arrived, but I was concentrating on my last recording, the giant tsunami heading towards Crete to bring death and destruction on a massive scale. And, as usual, when major events occurred at St Mary's, I was looking in completely the wrong direction. I was recalled from scenes of the island's utter devastation by Dr. Bestow's voice in my ear, requesting the pleasure of my company. My conscience was clear, both on my own account and that of my department, because we hadn't been back from Crete long enough to get into any real trouble, so I bounded confidently up the stairs to his office. Mrs. Partridge waved me through. Dr. Bestow had a guest, a square, stocky woman with crinkly brown hair and a professionally blank expression. I thought she looked like an athlete. There wasn't an ounce of fat on her. It was all muscle. I was suddenly very conscious there wasn't an ounce of muscle on me. It was all fat. Dr. Maxwell, may I introduce Captain Hyssop, seconded from the army to be our temporary head of security, and... Her head snapped up. With respect, sir, not temporary. I am your new head of security, as my papers show. I'm an historian and I know an argument when I've walked into the middle of one. This was one for Dr. Bestow to deal with. I'm sure they do, Captain, but St Mary's already has a head of security. Who is absent, sir? Who is on perfectly legitimate parental leave, from which he will return to resume his position as head of security. If it hadn't been so serious, it would have been funny. I suspected I was in a room with two people accustomed to getting their way in all things. I watched with interest to see who would prevail. Mrs. Partridge had also found an excuse to be present and was shuffling files on Dr. Bestow's briefing table. I had no idea how the powers that be knew St Mary's was temporarily without its official head of security. I suspected that, for all our appearance of autonomy, Dr. Bestow was required to send regular reports to someone or other, probably via Thirsk. I should imagine there's not much goes on here that someone isn't aware of, and it's not as if we're the most discreet organisation in the world. Just talked to Mrs. Huntley Palmer about the incident at the village fete, and it's not as if they were even our goats. The implications were beginning to sink in. This was serious. Head of security is a key post. Presumably this Hyssop person hadn't just been passing and decided to wander in on the off chance of a job. She was an official but unknown quantity. I could well understand Dr. Bestow's disquiet. He selects his own people, always has done. His face, as usual, gave nothing away, but the signs were there if you knew what to look for, and I was an expert. He was seriously not happy. I decided to weigh in. I'm sorry, sir, I'm confused. Isn't Mr. Evans our acting head of security? Do we actually need another head of security? Because then we will have 3 heads of security, I mean. Where will we put them all? Will there be a rota? Hyssop frowned at me. Why would you need a rota? Oh, great. A head of security with no sense of humour. This should be interesting. Actually, I said, now I come to think of it, it's 4. What is? 4 heads of security. I forgot Major Guthrie down in the village. I looked at Dr. Bestow. Is this one of those situations where we're about to find ourselves with more heads of security than actual people to be head of security over, sir? Fortunately, no one was taking any notice of me. Dr. Bestow said evenly, Captain, your papers say you are here as a replacement for Mr. Markham. Therefore, when Mr. Markham returns, you will no longer be his replacement. You are, therefore, temporary. If Mr. Markham does not return, then I will no longer be temporary. Obviously, Captain, you are privy to information I do not possess. Are you so certain Markham will not return? He peered over his spectacles at her. Do you, perhaps, know something we do not? She hesitated for a moment and then said, It is felt there is a possibility Mr. Markham will become engrossed in his new responsibilities and not wish to return to St. Mary's. Dr. Bestow smiled his spider smile, the one inviting the unwary fly into his parlour. I rather suspect wishful thinking on someone's part. However, time ticks on and we have an issue to resolve. Let us decide to regard the word temporary as temporary and agree that you are here, temporarily, as Mr. Markham's temporary replacement. We can resume this discussion on his return. She hesitated again, trying to work out what he'd just said, but it was a face-saving solution for everyone. Otherwise, we could be here all day. She turned to me. I still don't know who you are. Well, that was fine by me. Maxwell top tip for the day. Never voluntarily reveal your identity to authority. Dr. Bestow remained silent, so in the end I said brightly, Maxwell. There was a pause. I looked at Dr. Bestow, who nodded slightly. Head of the history department. She didn't offer to shake hands. Miss Maxwell? Miss Hyssop? It's Captain, she said frostily. It's Doctor, I said, and we were off to a flying start.